What's going on, advocates? Welcome back to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Man, today, I got a special guest in the building. I know I say special guest, but I got to give the people flowers while they're here. And before this podcast got started, before even everything that everybody know that I'm doing got started, this was a brother that I talked to way before all of these stuff got started. And I don't even think he knows this, but he invited me. He had a speaking engagement that he was supposed to go to, and he couldn't make it. He was like, "Hey, I know what you're doing. I think it'll be good for you to go. I'm gonna recommend you in my place." He came back and said they was like, "No, they just want a therapist, so I can't. They won't let you come as a speaker, but you should still go for the good information." At that meeting or at that conference, whatever it was, I met the founders of Black Men Hill at that conference, and the rest is history. I know I came and been a part of the Black Men Hill program, or whatever the case may be. So, without further ado, I don't introduce anybody, brother. So please introduce yourself to the people.
Oh, man, that's putting all the pressure on me, man. Because I do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, nah, all right, everybody, tell me, let you tell the people who you are. So I am Phil Roundtree. Oh man, that's it's difficult. It's difficult because we often told we're not supposed to brag on ourselves or show off or what have you. Just something in the culture, which is probably problematic anyway. But I'm Phil Roundtree. I am a licensed clinical social worker based here in Philadelphia. I'm a scholar activist. I am a social work doctoral student. I'm a social work professor at Delaware State University. And I'm the founder of Quantify LLC, which is a organization that's geared on enhancing the wellness of an individual, group, or company, just anybody and their mama, right? So it's this idea that the name Quantify represents the four areas of wellness that I deem as being critical if we're not going to only live but thrive in this world, and that's physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional wellness. And if there's a deficit in one, then there's a deficit in another. More than likely, right? So think about if you have a physical ailment. A lot of times, if you have a physical ailment, which can be difficult to navigate psychologically, difficult to navigate emotionally, right? And so we start to see these deficits that impact our quality of life. And so some of the services that I offer are therapy, right, as being a licensed clinical social worker. I also have a master's in exercise science, so I also offer general physical wellness services. So I'm not like a trainer in the gym. I stopped doing that a long time ago. But I can create a wellness plan, a holistic wellness plan to assist folk. I do a lot of work with Black men, specifically Black boys, Black males, not only because I'm one of them, right, but because I recognize the lack of emphasis that society puts on mental health in general. I know we're in a different space now where people are talking about it more, but we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years, specifically with Black folk, who we talking about historical trauma, we're talking about present day trauma that we have to navigate, right? And so for me, the work that I do with men is that to help men unlearn, right? Unlearn a lot of things, a lot of unhealthy behaviors that impact their wellness. So we're talking about the patriarchy, right? We're talking about capitalism. We're talking about white supremacy and all of these things that truly impact how Black men show up in different spaces. And so I don't use the term toxic masculinity. I know a lot of people do, right? But I look at what does it mean to be a healthy human being, and that's being able to um, that's being able to just navigate and process your emotions, being able to be human, right? Trying to think. I have a two podcasts I haven't recorded in a while, but I'm still paying the $12 a month to SoundCloud, so I'm gonna keep talking about them until I do another one. So I have hashtag You Good Man, which is on all streaming platforms in audio version, and in the audio version of it. Then I have Rhetorically Speaking, which is me just being a social commentator on different issues that's happening in the world, looking at it from the lens of a therapist, looking at it from the lens of an activist. So that's on YouTube. So yeah, that's it. I
Nah,
think.
I appreciate that, and you're right. I've learned early to put the onus on the person instead of me trying to describe the person. So I may have borrowed that from you, but yes. So I met Phil in a support group that he was running, his you good man support group early on, and just was fascinated about what he was doing and how it was impacting the brothers and on some stuff you probably don't even recognize, that modeling for me of like the neighborhood hero of who's doing something that I would like to do. I just have to find my way to do it. So I want to give you your flowers in that aspect,
Word.
without just duplicating the same exact thing. Like where is my contribution and where it can go at. And been very supportive. Had me on his radio show when he had one in the city. Um,
Word.
I've been there and all of the different things. So I appreciate you for that. But you brought up something that I want to dive into because it's a term that I haven't heard before. I don't know how long it's been existing, but again, when I learn, I love educating the audience and so that they can learn as well. Scholarly activists. What does that include?
So a scholar activist, right, is this idea of how can I put it? Is it's like being book smart and street smart, right? And it's not to say, no shade, because I think everybody's an expert, number one, on their own life, right? But I've acquired a lot of student loans in my lifetime, right? I'm about 150,000 deep. So when they talk about 10,000, you get 10,000 back. I'm like, oh, that's chump change. I'm happy for everybody else, you know what I mean? But I owe the man a lot. They not getting their money. So if they watching the feds, they not getting their money, point blank. But so the scholar piece is first I've acquired. I'm on my fourth degree, right? So I have a bachelor's and master's in social work. I have a master's in exercise science, and I'm working on my dissertation to get my doctorate in social work. And so yeah, some folk look at that as scholarly, right? Just based on this idea that we have as it goes to education, right? But the term scholar is really about learning, right? And so you can be a scholar where you might not have the degrees, right? But you have the experience. You're putting in the work to learn to do more. Similar, just like yourself, right? You could be considered a scholar activist. And if we're talking about the truest sense of what it means to be a learner, what does it mean to be an educator, to educate oneself? I think about this brother who his name escapes me. I think his name escapes me, right? But he had a series on Netflix, Who Killed Malcolm X? And he was literally a tour guide in Washington, D.C., right? Uh, no formal academic background, but again, he knew how to go to the archives, to read, to do all this work, right? To find out. And we knew the people that were convicted of killing Malcolm X didn't kill Malcolm X. This everybody knew this, right? The work that he did definitely contributed in the one person who was recently exonerated and let out of prison. He just got a $25 million law settlement from the state of New York as a result of it. His work and doing the research, right, and doing all of that aided in that process of getting him out, right? And so that's also an activism piece to that too, right? Where because we think about activism where you're going out in the streets, you're pom pomming, you're champion, no, no justice, no peace, no crooked police or something like that. Yes, that's a form of activism, but also advocacy is speaking up on behalf of the marginalized and oppressed persons within society. Again, which you do, right? And so when we think about the term scholar activist, that's really what it is, and it's merging the two, right?
No,
It's taking this information that I'm acquiring on my own and through my experiences, and then I'm using that to elevate and speak on behalf of and champion those who have been marginalized, oppressed in any capacity.
no, and I appreciate that too because there is some insecurities with because I didn't have the degree within having these conversations that am I supposed to be speaking on certain topics with certain, without certain credentials? And even now, up to that, I'm in school now, and I still have that, vulnerability or insecurity of like, oh man, they're going to figure me out, or this is going to be like the haha moment is going to come eventually, where it's like the therapists will band together, or the mental health people will band together and say, hey, no more community, I guess, expertise. Whereas hearing individuals like yourself is always coming from you all that says like, yo, that is a valuable component when talking to individuals, because they want to see themselves in the in reaching that space of what you talked about earlier when you were saying, describing yourself, that quantify that wellness. And a part of that is being able to see a place of like where I look like I can achieve eventually. So I appreciate that, and I learned a new term, so I appreciate that as well.
Word.
um
Well,
uh
and just to comment on what you said, right? Like even this, because people talk about imposter syndrome, and I used to use that term a lot, right? But in reality, imposter syndrome is really white supremacy. You know
mhm,
what I mean? Where we talk about this idea of what comes the everything that comes with this idea of white supremacy, right? These credentials, like these credentials don't mean shit. All they do is they just allow me to be in certain spaces. But this book, this information is out there for everybody, right? But white supremacy says, oh, you have to have a degree to be able to do certain things. And we recognize that degrees and what have you were ways to exclude people, especially Black folk. I think about my profession of social work. Once Black folks started getting degrees, they were like, all right, let's get licensure. Let's bring licensure in, right? Again, it's a way to separate. It's a way to oppress and suppress the voices of others. But when we look at the people who are out here historically who have been doing the work, right? Because that's the main thing, doing the work. A lot of them didn't have the necessarily the formal education, but they still had this desire to learn, which again is we could all if we got the if we got a book list, we can easily go in and learn. You know what I mean? And understand mental health and understand it at a level higher than or, or equal to somebody who has a degree. It's a brother, an elder. He passed away by the name of John Henry Clark, right? And so John Henry Clark, he's like the god of Africana studies, right? It's like anybody in that space with related to Black folk, they were around him, they knew him, and he was just like a foremost expert. To my knowledge, he didn't have a formal degree, right? What he got was honorary degrees. You know what I mean? They gave him, hey, we're gonna give you this degree. And so they gave him this degree. But again, if somebody say John Henry Clark and you say that amongst folk, who went to Black studies or Black liberation, listen, it's put him up against anybody.
mhm,
So I say that to you to say when you do have these self-defeatist thoughts, when you do have this, I may not belong here. Again, I'm working on my fourth degree, and I still be in spaces like, should I be here, right? Or will I figure it out? I remember that's the role of it all. You know
mhm.
what I mean? Since we came over here to have us questioning our talents and our abilities and our willingness and desire to acquire new knowledge.
So I appreciate that, but I'm gonna give you pushback, not because I disagree, but because I want to use this answer for myself. What do you say when people will say, well, we need some type of regulation like licensure, like bachelor's, like degrees, like these different things to prevent harm that they may cause because they don't have the formal regulated education to help people?
Yeah, and that's a question I get asked a lot, right? It's like because I'm anti everything. If you don't follow me, or Reg,
I know.
you follow me on socials. I'm anti everything, but I am licensed, right? And I just did that on a whim. I just wanted to see if I was going to pass, but I wasn't going to take it again if I would have failed,
Mm,
right? Because for me, it doesn't validate me or what it is that I'm trying to do. And so when somebody talks about licensure, yes, there's a piece about quote unquote our oversight, but that doesn't mean that harm doesn't happen, right? I know quite it was when anybody hits me up and asks me, do I know a therapist, right? A licensed therapist, I'll be like, listen, nah, I don't. I know licensed therapists, but I can't vouch for them because I've seen it time and time again. where harm has been perpetuated. I've been in these rooms with psychologists, psychiatrists who are licensed who perpetuate harm, right? And so there is no there, and there, when it happens to persons of the global majority, there, and when I say persons of the global majority, like I don't like the term minority, right? I was making a video for my students today, and one of the videos that was the university gave, and I teach at a Negro university. One of the videos that they gave said uh, minorities and race. And I'm like, well, and I'm putting this in my video. I'm like, so I want y'all to look at this, right? You go to a Black university, you see this term minority. Now think about it in terms of baseball, because that's the most recent thing that take place. When we think of the majority, when we think of the majors, we think of elite, right? We think of the best of the best. When we think about Major League Baseball players, minor league players are they just not that good,
Mm,
right? They're not good enough to be at this elite level. And so we need to be mindful of the terminology that we use. But when it comes down to licensure, it's here, right? It's here. But I'm a firm believer. But I'm not going to sit here and vouch for it and say that individuals with licensure hasn't perpetuated harm and that there's been any um, positive responses when that happens.
man, if y'all can't tell by the short time we talk with Phil, he has such a thought provoking thing, and I think it, for me, I'll speak for myself. It questions the groundedness you have about an opinion of life or self or whatever the case may be. And I don't even think you do it just to antagonize. I really do think you put all the marbles out there to say you pick and choose. And so when you said the whole thing about, like, I think something you posted about Deion Sanders and the HBCU and some of that nature, and it's like, and the one thing, and mind you, if I'm misquoting you, um, please tell me that is wrong, because I was trying to go back and find it so that way I can bring it to the podcast. But you said something along the line. It was a while back, and it made me think about it and made me restructure. I swear it was you, and please let me know if it was, about gun violence and how you said the killers and the perpetrators of them are not coming to your gun buybacks. They're not at your community meetings. They're not at your town halls or your they're not at these spaces. So X, Y, and Z was after that. And I'm like, damn, that made me think like you so right. Because it's not even that what I'm doing is wrong or being a part of those things are wrong or right or whatever the case may be. But just know that the perpetrators of these certain things are not in these spaces. So is it really doing the job that you intended to? And that had me thinking about, was that you? And am I correct in that?
Yeah. No, you right. You right. Oh, it's who was it? Was it my homegirl? Is because somebody I'm cool with, Joanna McClinton. She's a state rep out in like the Southwest Yaden area, and she's wonderful. She got me to vote for the first time, and I'm about to vote tomorrow. I switched up my whole thought process related to voting as a result of her coming on my show, rhetorically speaking. And but I see her, I see other people who have these community events related to gun violence and what have you. And I recognize that there's a purpose in it, right? We know who's not showing up, as you alluded to, right? We know that the person who's doing the killings, they not showing up. A lot of time, the victims of gun violence may or may not show up, but what's showing up is community, and there is something to be said about community and empowering community and saying, listen, we still here. And instead of, because we see a lot of times, I was just at an event on Saturday, right? We see a lot of times where gun violence and violence in general takes place and the community shuts their doors. I'm thinking about I don't know if you ever seen Meteor Man, right? And
Yeah,
in
a long
in
time ago.
Meteor, yeah, in Meteor Man with Robert Townsend and this black superhero.
Mm,
And I bring that up because there was a lot of violence that was taking place, right? And people were closing their doors as the violence was taking place, right? Instead of hopping out. And it took him to come and reinvigorate the community And then you see James Earl Jones, his prize record collection. He's throwing the records at the people. You see Marla Gibbs from 227. She coming out. The community runs out with pans and stuff like that, right? So it is something to be said about the empowerment piece of it. But if the goal is to get the killers out and to get not even the killers, I hate terms like that. To get the people who engage in this type of behaviors, um, they're not the ones that's showing up. So even when we look at gun buyback, I'm critical of it because what if it's a murder weapon that's being turned in? If I took somebody's life, that's gonna be I'm gonna go get me $100 worth of groceries, right, and turn the weapon in.
Mm.
If I'm engaging in that type of behavior. So again, but I'm anti-police too, so I don't know what the best way to go about that would be. But yeah, it gets guns off the street. But I just don't know if people think about all sides. I appreciate the accolades that you bestowed upon me, and as you were saying, I was just like, is he talking about you? Like this is things that we actively got to work through. Not only is Black folk, but Black men specifically. But it's this elder. He passed away as well by the name of Asa Hilliard, and his whole thing was, all right, we're asking questions, right? And now, how can we ask questions that ask to get better questions? And the more we work to get towards better questions, that helps us get closer to the answer,
Mm.
right? So, and I've adopted that in the all the spaces that I occupy.
Yeah, man. And one of the recent ones. So I decide usually I hold on to these podcasts a little bit before I put them up, but this one gonna come out this week because of the information that we're given and within it, and the topics that it's surrounding. So it's two of them I want to touch on, and just pick your brain. I have the quote, but I won't read it all out because you said it, so you know what you were saying when you said it. But you were talking about the complexity of the recent shooting with rapper Takeoff, where um it's so many different realms that you can go in. But the one that I thought about too was I can't even listen to certain people music, like Pop Smoke. He got shot, so now when he's saying he got it on him and all of that stuff, it kind of like sounds weird now. Or when you listen to Takeoff and he talks and they got their music and they're talking about spinning the block or doing these different things, but that he died the gun violence, so tying back into that and how it's just so many different things you think about within that. And then it may be a friend that was around, and you said the pressure or the guilt that Quavo and Offset may be facing. Quavo for a different reason than Offset because they wasn't talking. But the complexity of just that one 10-second situation and how many ramifications that's going to have on everybody involved. And even as we talk today, there have been more things that have come out. A teacher that came out that said she knew, and it was like, you were a fifth grade teacher, and now you all of a sudden she like, I didn't know he was a rapper, but now are you looking for clout? Then you got a friend. It's just so many
Mm.
different things that are coming out, and I just want to get your thoughts and opinions on that because it's we don't talk enough about how many individuals are affected by just one small situation. I don't even say small situation, but traumatic situation.
Yeah, it's because I'm in LA Fitness right now, so a family walked out, and I think they think I work here because I'm inside the kids club, or maybe I think they was getting a tour, maybe. Yeah, it's so much when it comes to just incidents of violence, right? Incidents of violence is not just the one person or the one family that's impacted. And this is what happens when you think about it from a community perspective. Excuse me. You think about all the lives that are affected. Excuse me, I'm sitting here drinking this energy drink and it's getting to me. Um, you think about all the lives that are affected from one person dying, even if it's not a violent crime, right? Think about a matriarch who might die who was keeping the family together, and that impacts so many people. My brother died when I was 17, and he was 24. That impacted so many people, right? That impacted not only myself, my mother, that impacts my daughter who never met him, that impacts my son who never met him, that's impacted relationships that I've had, that impacts relationships that I've had, just encounters with people that I've had in life. That all shows up in those type of situations. And so the complexities of it, yeah, it was, it was definitely unfortunate. Especially with something of this magnitude, and you got nasty places like TMZ who get the video, who people taking pictures, which again, I understand why people take pictures, because if something happens, why wouldn't you? Right. But again, this goes to the psychology of where we are with social media in general, and the impact that it has on us in our daily lives, even in moments of trauma. But yeah, so with Takeoff, it's not only Takeoff and everybody that was around when that took place, seeing him die. Then you look at Quavo. You think about, it was his argument, right? I was sitting there watching, and I don't watch the ball at all. But somehow DJ Academics came up in my YouTube feed, and it was like he points out the killer, and dag sure, I'm like, yo, I think the bull might have did it, right?
Yeah.
And so he's sitting there playing Columbo, and I'm sitting there looking at, it was Quavo argument with somebody else. Quavo tries to leave, and something transpires. So now you have that guilt on you, right? And how does that impact him and going forward in life? And as a, I don't know if he's a father or
I think
not, but
that's
as a
a.
father,
Mm-hmm.
as a friend, as a sibling, as so much. Takeoff's family, right? You think about Offset, who, why he was disconnected from his brothers, because they brothers regardless, right? Just based off what they've done together and the experiences that they've had, even if you have to separate yourself from your brother for whatever reason. Because yeah, it's this survivor's guilt on both ends, right? On from Offset, not from Offset, from Quavo, like, why him, why not me? I feel guilt around that. Then you have some remorse from Offset. We didn't get the opportunity to squash the beef or what have you. So yeah, so and then again, the community, we all see this. What does this mean for hip hop in general? What does this mean in terms of just black love and black life? So yeah, so many things just come from situations, right? And everything that we do, not just right. Like we think about, it was a commercial where somebody might have did a pay it forward. We think about pay it forward, right? You might pay for somebody's meal, and the next thing you know, they're doing something good for somebody else. So think about it in terms of that. Like, we're all connected, right? We're interconnected. It's just in what ways and how we're going to be impacted by it, in a healthy way or an unhealthy way.
Man, we talking to Phil, man, Phil Roundtree, and Phil. I knew Phil was famous when I was in at work, and or one I was somewhere, and I had to hit him in the DM like, yo, we learning about you and I'm like, I know Phil, and it's not to diminish. I know he does great work, but I'm like, wow, they're like doing like op-ed pieces on his TED talk and what he was doing and what he was saying in there, and I'm like, that's legendary to know someone that's doing this work and be connected. So I appreciate you again for coming on and sharing. And I wanted to ask something that you spoke of. Oh no, this again a personal question. Especially because I'm looking for my answer in it within it, so you can kind of look at it like that. That I just pulled up the TED talk that was from September 2018, right? And within these years and going into what is it, 4 years now? Yeah, 4 years now. Since then, there has been a change in the landscape of mental health since this that has happened. And again, that's the year I started within this space, but we have seen many podcasts, many people, many more people. What are your thoughts on the business side, not the mental health side, because I know we'll say like, it's good that a lot of people talking, but the boom side of business when it comes to mental health in this aspect, because now I think it's hard to, you got celebrities talking about it, you got NFL players, everybody, um, it's hard to see who's really dedicated versus the business side of this is popular and trendy, so I want to make money from it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I'm not sure how I feel about it. In all honesty, my immediate go to was just like, it's nasty. I think that was my immediate go to. Just the again, the business side of it, right? Where people are trying to monetize. by offering fluff, right? Not offering something significant, substantial. And but again, I have to be mindful of what my therapist said to me. She was like, and I shouted her out in that TED talk, Dr. Val, and what she said to me was, Phil, right? Like, you have this ability to think critically, right? But some people need it straight on the surface, right? They can only handle so much, right? And it's funny, I'm sitting here writing my dissertation, and it's related to my mental health. And I'm reading part of my memoir that I wrote from 2018, talking about an experience in my childhood. And I'm reading it, and I was like, this is like sophisticated prose, like this is like sophisticated writing. And it's like, I'm like, why? Why couldn't I just be simple to communicate something that could just reach people? Am I overcompensating for not having the language at an earlier age when I was going through that experience? So now here we are. Am I trying to prove something to somebody? Right. And so what I recognize is like, I'm me, right? And I have to be true to myself. And so when I think about others, there are others who are able to convey things in a much simpler way than I am, right? Which, and they also have a space. They also deserve space. Again, when we start getting money involved with anything, and that's just the nature of capitalism. Nature of capitalism and white supremacy is nasty, right? It's about how can I make money for maybe noble reasons, like I got to feed my family. So if I got to talk surfacey about something, or if I see a trend to talk about something and it's going to help me go viral, that's going to help me make a couple of dollars, can I really knock that? But then again, that's when I got to think about self. I got to think about my message and really focus on what it is that I'm doing. And so even things, or similar to you, it's and your platform. How can I combat the misinformation? How can I combat the individuals who are out here trying to profit, right? Whether it's corporations, whether it's individuals, how can I combat that? What is my role? It's like even with the like people giving unsheltered people money and they recording it, right? Doing a good thing. It's like, oh, it don't feel right. But then I see a picture of like Takeoff on the ground, and I'm like, we need somebody to combat this imagery, right? We
Mm.
need some healthy things. And again, I don't know if giving the money on camera is healthy or not, but yeah, man, it's just one of those things where I try not to get too caught up in it because it's easy for me to get caught up in it into things like that. But I'm glad we're having a conversation. I'm glad there are celebrities um, who use their platform in a healthy way, in ways that they think are healthy. Like I'm critical of Charlemagne. You know what I mean? Like I saw Taz and them up there. You know what I mean? It was like I wanted to watch the episode, but I'm like, I don't bang with Bull because I recognize that he's still in a space of learning. Right. And so, and it's me showing grace and recognizing they're still in a place of learning. I'm maybe a little farther along. So when I think about Black male mental health, I'm thinking about what does that mean for Black trans women, right? What does our wellness and how we show up in this idea of masculinity, how does it impact them? How does it impact women, right? How does it impact our children? Where Charlemagne might just be on like depression and anxiety, right? He doesn't recognize how Lil Duval comments about trans women and him chuckling about it, how that's detrimental to the mental health of folks. So I try to show grace, but there needs to be more accountability when it comes to that.
Nah, and I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I do think because I was up there in New York with them too, with the Mental Health Alliance, and I think because he knows that he doesn't know everything, that's why he tried to get organizations to as a collective for his mental health team. But even within that are the organizations and my and black again, I'm a big proponent of Black Hill. Are we doing a good job of creating that space for, like you said, trans women and things of that nature? And to your point, even myself, I've been checking within myself of how do I advance this conversation now? Because again, the simple and the surface level stuff of depression, anxiety, these different things, I think everybody can talk in that I don't want to say everybody, a lot of people are talking in that space right now. But what's the all right now? How do you get deeper without getting deeper without losing people too? And I
Mhm.
think that's the complexity of everything. Because even now, I'll give you the thing that I hope to do next year with this platform is all right, Black mental health is not just an African American experience. There's a UK experience, there's a Caribbean experience, there's a Canadian Black, and I mean like Black experience over there as well. And so now that's my goal of having this conversation, and is how do I have those type of conversations? Because they said even over here, America, I already got one recorded where she said America is almost like the popular girl. So we, are dictating conversation right now where there are certain issues within those communities that get lost as in regards to mental health because they're not with as the popular girl, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It's like, how can we have these broader conversations? How can we go a little bit deeper? And that is that. So I think about a homie of mine, Kavana. He's 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 African. He came over here when he was uh when he was real young, right? So he has this culture pretty much, right? And so he's Ghanaian. His dad is over in Ghana. He go over there every year to navigate it. And so on one of my platforms, we were just talking about parenting as fathers, right? And he's transparent about his relationship with his father and what that looked like. Because again, he's not being parented by a Black American man. He was being parented by a Black African man, right? An African man, and what that looked like and how that experience was. And yes, there was some overlap, right? But also there was some differences that came with that. So yeah, when we talk about our Black Caribbean folk, mental health is especially amongst Black men is, I'm not going to say much more devastating, but it's this idea of masculinity, right, is devastating in places like Jamaica and the Caribbeans and what have you, in the UK, right? And all you got to do is, like, I sit and watch, like, I watch Top Boy, right? And like, you sit and you watch it, you're like, yeah, there's some similarities. There's some differences though, right? Like, what's the racism like over here and over there that impacts your mental health? And or if you from South Africa and you live in South Africa as post apartheid, and you navigating that, apartheid wasn't that long ago, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So what does that mean for Black individuals? So salute to you. And these are ways, and this, when we talk about, this is how we make the conversation richer, right? This is how we improve upon it.
Now I got you, and I know you at a in a space where you may not be able to sit for long in a quiet
Oh
space.
no, I'm good. I'm good.
I got two more that I want to ask, and I didn't even get to ask you what I want to ask, and I mean getting into your story of how you got into the space. So we gonna rewind that and get that. But there were certain educational topics that you always bring up and have me thinking about, and then that are going on, and I think I'm coming from a space of like being a novice and trying to learn and get educated on it. So let's start with the first one. It's two more. Kyrie. And
Kyrie.
what's going on
Yeah.
with Kyrie, the complexities of Kyrie, where I again being in the ignorant space, meaning I'm not knowing, I didn't even know the term anti-Semitism until this week with Kanye or two Kanye and them came up, and then so Kanye is the second question, so you can lead right into that if you want. But Kyrie and the complexity of them not holding Amazon accountable, but holding him accountable, and then is this now becoming an anti-black conversation? Again, I'm coming from an unknown. So let Mr. Roundtree with the brain that he has break all of this stuff that's going down. I know you can't go in all over the place, but cover it for the novice of what is happening. We know he said something about a movie, and now they don't let him play basketball no more. So what's going on?
Fab, listen, I'm just as much as when it comes to this idea of anti-Semitism. I have a little bit of an understanding with it. Um, but like I said, and I may have I said it on my platforms, like that conversation about, you know, about anti-Semitism, I know what hate looks like. I think we all know what hate looks like, right? But when we break it down specifically um, to what that term means, I've gone on like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, to really get an understanding, a basic understanding of what anti-Semitism might look like, and it's a lot of it looks similar to what anti-black looks like, right? But which is has some irony in it as well. So from what I know, and this is the part where I say I have no idea, right? So he posted the picture from the movie, much like I did on my Instagram yesterday, because I was gonna watch the movie like 3 hours, you know what I mean? And I saw it was like 3 hours, like 10 minutes. I'm like, damn, that's a hell of a long movie. You know what I'm saying, to sit and watch. But I was like, I want to watch it just because I don't want to be out here. It's irresponsible to have a platform to have conversations about something you haven't seen, whether you agree with it or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there were no links, and I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked. And I have a jailbroken Fire Stick. Shout out to Amazon, I guess, right? So he posted a picture of the film on the social media, and this is where the onus is on him. There was no context given, really, right? And so he talked about his name, something related to his name, and when he put his name into Amazon, the film came up. So he was going to watch the film thinking that he would get some deeper understanding when it came to his name, and just he's a truth seeker. That's one thing I can say about Kyrie. Kyrie's not stupid. He might be unserious at times, but Kyrie's not a stupid person. And so he posted that. And again, you post something on social media, you better be ready for what comes with it. Somebody saw it, Hebrews the Negroes. Whoa, let me go watch this. Oh, word. This is how they giving it up inside the film. It's some anti-Semitic stuff, anti-Jewish stuff. I haven't watched it, so I can't speak to whether they denied the Holocaust happened, which is a part of anti-Semitism that some folk do, right? Like, nah, the Holocaust never happened. Uh, and so, and rightfully so, journalists asked him about it, right? They pressed him on it. And his response wasn't clear and coherent, which is often the case with him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so because he didn't explain himself um, adequately, that what happens? People start asking more questions, like we talk about, like I just mentioned, right? So they start asking more questions, and then more people get wind of what's taking place, and then it's like, well, is there something in the movie that you agree with? Well, there were some things in the movie that I agree with, but there was also some things I didn't agree with. The next likely question is, well, what didn't you agree with? Right? What did you agree with? And so when it comes to this idea of the original black man, and again, this is where we start getting into the 5%ers. We start getting to the Hebrew Israelites who be at, downtown,
That's
and
what
who
I was
used to
gonna
be
ask
at
you.
be
Mm-hmm.
at like Broad and Alany.
Mm-hmm.
I could say, and I know a brother who was a Hebrew Israelite, used to play basketball with Jimmy. Listen, walk right by him. I ain't
Mm-hmm.
trying to, I don't know what you're saying. I think, again, and this goes to they're well read, right? These brothers, if you want to stop and have a conversation with them, you want to try to prove them wrong, you better be on your ish,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's all they do is sit and read and believe the content that they're speaking, right? Um, and so with that, he, I'm sorry, I hate this boy. Like literally hate this boy that just came in. My bad. I don't hate him. I have strong dislike for
I
him.
got you.
It's something I got it. So he threw me off when I saw him. And so when we talk about that, like, because there's this idea that the black folk are the original Hebrew individual. Again, that whole idea of who's original, who's
Who's
not,
not?
that's above my pay grade. I have no idea. But what I can see in the response is I can say that Kyrie isn't a victim when it comes to this idea. Once you post something on your platform,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a responsibility to articulate yourself. There's been plenty of times where I've post something and the response is like, whoa, I didn't mean that. You know what I mean? Matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, let me just take that down. Thankfully for me, I don't have millions of people following me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not a highly paid athlete and have fame, which makes this journey of truth that you're on, this seeking of truth that you're on, a lot more difficult, right?
Mm,
And so he had several opportunities to apologize, right? And this is where we start to get, we it starts to get a bit fuzzy when it comes to, and we start to see conflict arise amongst communities. Because I think when we think about Jewish people, the majority of Black folks see white people, right?
mm,
We're not thinking of a group that has experienced
trauma.
tragedy
Mm,
by way and trauma by way of the Holocaust and Hitler. What we see is white people. Why do we
You
see
see
white
Hollywood.
people? Exactly.
Mm,
For some people see Hollywood, right?
mm,
But why do we see white people? Because there's a lot of Jewish people who comport themselves to white because
mm,
it's easy, right? It's easier, so it's easy to assimilate into whiteness,
mm,
which many have done. And so when we think about in terms of being Jewish and that being a religion, you don't have to tell anybody you're Jewish, right?
mm,
You can change your name. I can't hide my skin color, right? I can't change my skin color. Sammy Sosa tried. It
mm,
doesn't work,
mm,
right? You're still a black man. And so what happens and again, if we're talking about wanting to play basketball, sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet, right? And say, listen, I apologize. But black folk are and say, I apologize for not offering more
con-
context on the film. I didn't mean I didn't mean to harm anybody, right? I recognize that the Jewish community has experienced tragedy as well, right? I'm just doing a truth seeking mission. And so I'm not going to necessarily apologize for posting the film, right? Because if we're in the process of learning, right, and trying to understand truth, there are going to be some things that we watch and we like, oh, heck no, right?
mm,
This is bad. We might want input from others. Um, but to be castigated the way that he has, this is where people do start to look at him as being victimized. We do start to look at it being as anti-black when they say for you to play, you have to meet this six criteria,
mm,
right? So you have to apologize. Then you have to go to sensitivity training. Then you have to meet with Jewish leaders, right? Then you have to meet with the owner and talk about all you've learned. And when I look at it, right, what I see is I see the hoops that black men, black folk, black women often have to go to when they do have a misstep,
mm,
right? We have to go above and beyond. We can't just say my bad and keep it moving like other groups can,
mm,
right? And so what we see is, and it's something called black protectionism, right? And the closest example that I can give the folk is Michael Vick, right? And Michael Vick, when with the dog ring, which we can acknowledge was problematic, but again, if we understand the culture in the South, that's something that's done, right? Um, and so he went to jail. He apologized. He started doing philanthropy work with regards to that. It was white folk who didn't care, right? You're a
mm,
dog killer. You're this, you're that. And black folk like, oh, all right, yeah, we could slap him on the wrist. But what we're not going to do is let you hang him, right? Because we've seen this all too often, right? It's a movie Till that's out right now that I won't see, right? Because somebody he looked at somebody, then not even a misstep, and we see the extreme response to perceive missteps when it comes to black folk. And so this idea of black protection, I mean, the same thing with OJ the first time. Like black folk wasn't going to say he killed that white woman. Why? Because we recognize what the justice system has done to black folk throughout history, right? And so my blackness won't allow me to say OJ killed that white woman. Now, if we amongst each other,
OG did it.
it's
Mm,
it's a different story, right? But we're going to protect you because we know once they get their claws into you, and again, they, not necessarily Jewish folk, we talk about white people and we talk about whiteness and we talk about this idea of white supremacy. Once they get their claws in you, they never let go, right?
mm,
Until you die, in which in his case, dying means retiring or being waived and never playing basketball again,
mm,
right? And so and that's why we see like this quote unquote conflict, that's taking place. And we see black folk saying, no, we riding for Kyrie. And it was just, and that's more based on, it has nothing to do necessarily with anti-Semitism. It has
Mm,
everything to do with, we know what white folk do when they get their grips on you, right? And so we're going to protect you, even if you're wrong.
mm. Man, listen, there's so much nuance within that conversation that, again, I don't know enough to have it. And that's why I wanted you to, explain it in a way. Because all I hear is a person that was seeking truth that didn't know the full context of something that he was seeking truth from. And he put it out there and as a person of influence, not knowing the full severity of what he was putting out there. So he like, what? I just put up something, like I threw it up there and now I'm paying such a harsh backlash, which is like, hey, you don't know what this film or project or whatever has done or has caused harm. And even with this conversation, I'm like, I'm trying to make sure that I'm fully recognizing that the impact that it may have on somebody that's listening that may not be familiar with anything that's going on, but just providing that full context. Because when everything that Kyrie was saying, all I kept thinking was the dudes at Broad or Center City, and I'm like, is he on that type of time? I'm like, we don't even pay them type of time, no person. Like, so I'm thinking he's on that type of time,
Yeah.
and that's where I was like, well, what's the harm in what they're doing? Like, they just, I again not knowing, and it's like, all right, just trying to see what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, and even with that, right? But that's also part of it, to where it's like Kevin Durant says something like, "Yo, I just, it's, I feel sorry for him or something. I just want to hoop." And then he had to come out on Twitter and say, "Listen, before y'all
Mm-hmm.
go run with it, because
Mm-hmm.
in America, and this is something that Jewish folk may or may not acknowledge, right? There are certain buzzwords that um get individuals riled up, right? Anti-Semitism is one of them. It's a difference, right? And so when we talk about this idea of being mindful of what I say, we know in society people could be anti-black all they want, right? Because that's just the norm. And so if we having a conversation, as we were having earlier, about gun violence, about things related to the black community, right? Not endemic to the black community, but impacts the black community, we could say that without second thoughts,
That's true.
right? But we're afraid of, oh, what's the backlash going to be? And again, that's not necessarily rooted in Jewish individuals. That's rooted in white supremacy and whiteness that Jewish folk have the privilege of being a part of,
Mm,
right? And so we know if you say something anti-Semitic, or if there's just a hint of thinking you're anti-Semitic, you got to come out and say, "I'm not anti-Semitic. I think the Holocaust happened." And it's just like, well, what if you don't think the Holocaust happened, right? What should happen? And this is where we go to this idea of, should you be able to make a living?
mm.
Probably should be able to make a living, but we also recognize that given your status, and given your platform, we recognize that the NBA it's a private business. They could get you up out the paint, just like they got Kaepernick up out the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was their anti-blackness showing, but we see that that's okay in mainstream society. But ultimately, we perpetuate anti-blackness as well, which is unfortunate. And so when we have these conversations about listening to the music, right? I saw LeBron, he came out on Saturday and condemned Kyrie, but then he dressed up as how Takeoff was in a picture. And I listened to his music, and his music is rooted, and the Migos music is rooted in anti-blackness, misogynoir, and capitalism. It's just like, so what we doing here? But again, if somebody doesn't know, what do we do, right?
Yeah, and I just want to say something. So with the anti-Semitism, again, I still don't know enough to fully have this conversation in the way it's probably supposedly had. Phil, it must be so tiring thinking the way that you think because it's so many different. I'm just exhausted just hearing it, like, because I got more questions than answers out of that. Like, I want to ask more, but I think you probably do that to yourself. Like, there's a battle of these different things playing with each other in there, and it must be exhausting.
I think you got me. You got me. You understand me, man. You understand me, man. It's most people don't get that, right? But in my head, because again, it's. And I was talking to my homegirl about this. It was just like I wish I was able to just be right. I wish I was able to like and this again, there's no shade to anybody. I wish I was able to like work at a McDonald's, right? Be happy with my job, be cool, be able to leave, chill with my loved one and just be oblivious to shit, but I don't have that option. I've been in my head since as much as I can remember, but with that being said, like I just started reading a couple years ago. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like this isn't something, but I always had like this ability to just sit and think,
mm,
and that comes with growing up being my brother was older, right? So I'm sitting there playing video games or I'm sitting there chilling just by myself for the most part. So I'm gonna be in my head, but that's also a quote unquote curse too, because you in your head so much. That's where you get anxiety. That's when you get depression. It exacerbates the symptoms. So, but for me, I enjoy this shit. I think So when I was on radio, like that's what spawned rhetorically speaking. Like, yeah, I genuinely enjoy this shit. I may not be right. I'm all right with not being right. But I just enjoy like higher level conversations. You know what I mean? Because it's like when somebody say, "Yo, how you doing?" I'm good. We so used to that, right? But what happens when we not used to having deep conversations with people? And I think the more we can have, the better off we'll be.
Nah, and that's partially why I started this podcast is to have these type of conversations. So I thank you for that, man. And speaking of, because you said something, I wanted to give some promo because I know this is where a lot of people know you from too. Is that this is what anxiety looks like. This is what depression looks like.
Yeah, that's all I wear.
So please make sure y'all go get the merch, man, because it is one that a lot of people, support and be a part of, man. And to your point, go support the podcast, go support the YouTube show, because it's more conversations like this. And again, I'm always thought provoking, like, because I'm gonna tell you how bad you are, Phil. I don't even know if I should like the post or not because I don't know if I like it or not. Like I don't even know. I'm like, like because
But then what?
it just made me think. So I'm like, if they had like a thinking face up there, I would have put that up there.
Word, and what that does to me is like it's funny you say that, like because again we've been programmed to where we get validation from a post. You know what I'm saying? And so if I don't have a certain amount of likes, I could be honest, and it's me having all the awareness that I have when it comes to social media and how toxic it is, and the reason why there's even a like button on socials. It started on Facebook because Facebook never had a like button, right? It never had like this endless scrolling where you could just scroll. It used to finish, right?
Mm,
You scroll and then it would stop, and then you would just have to go back up. But they recognized to get more people engaged, to keep them in this matrix, we're going to add a like button. And what does that do to your mood? What does that do to your confidence and how you feel? And so if I don't have enough likes, I take that joint right down. I might put it in my story, you know what I mean? Like, and post it up. But yeah, man, so I get it. I understand what you're saying for sure.
I don't want to end off on this, man, but I do gotta. I want to touch. I want you to touch on Kanye West because there's a thing that now this one I'll quote you because it's one that I see from myself or like seeing from like how I feel from it. Is you said watching the daily psychological emotional deterioration of Kanye is watching an increase in the likelihood of a premature death. Isn't that the most likely ending? Albeit different, it's eerily similar to the death aura around Biggie when he talked about someone being out to kill him. Speak on just that thought process and your feelings about and towards Kanye West. Well, I guess not towards because you don't really know him, but just about him.
Yeah. It's he's interesting, man. Like we feel like we know these people, and because we listen to their music, but in reality, we have no idea who they are. And so when we sit and we watch somebody like Kanye, and we watch these what appears to be manic episodes, I know he talked about them in you know the medications that he take, which or was supposed to be taken, what makes one think he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he may have mentioned it. we see we're watching like a psychological decline when we talk about manic behaviors, right? He's probably been manic the entire time, but he
Mm.
was manic, and it was able to be potentially managed by his mother, who offered some type of grounding for him when he was experiencing these things, right? Similar, and grounding is when we talk about Kyrie's search for truth. Um, it looks different each time because I don't think he's necessarily grounded in anything, right? And so how we're grounded impacts how we show up in these different spaces. And so for Kanye, his mother was his grounding when we talk about people, and her loss, we start to see him look for meaning. We start to see him occupy these different spaces. And what we know about individuals who experience mania, um, I mean, there's been like scuttlebutt, like conversation related to, whether he has autism, right? Whether he's autistic, just because the way that he hyper focuses on certain tasks, right? So it was the beats for a very long time. Then it was hip hop. Then it was like rapping. Then it was, but when I say like not just regular rap, like beats, I'm in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm completely invested. I'm oblivious to what's taking place. We see the awkwardness with his interaction with individuals, right? Which again, it could be very well be just a mood disorder that he has, or he's been diagnosed with. We talk about, so we see then goes into spirituality, Christianity, so he goes all in, right? We see him be extreme
Mm.
in so many spaces. Trump, it's not just let me see what this ball about. I'm all in, right? And so when we talk about mania, that's what we see with people. So his behaviors is no different than somebody being manic and having a credit card, and they go to the mall and max it out, all 5,000, right? And so we talk about um, you know, different displays of how his symptoms may be manifesting. And so what we're watching with him, it when it comes to, because I think he's intelligent, right? When it comes to, I don't necessarily want to use the term genius, but I think he's highly proficient in what it is that he does. And what we see is, again, somebody's not necessarily grounded in something, and it's taken away from them. Then what do you have? Right? If somebody's at the pinnacle, when we think about suicidal thoughts and we suicidal ideations and acts of suicide, right? Uh, at times we see people who, and again, this is just one example, where we see people who have it all and they lose it, right? We see individuals, they may have all A's and they get a C. What does that do to them psychologically? And so when we start to see the deterioration of it, and we're watching it play out in real time, you look at it like, first you're uncomfortable in watching it, right? Like I think a lot of people are, like, we seeing this take place, we seeing them talk on Twitter about different things. It's like it starts to make you uncomfortable. Then we start to, like, yo, he's so not coherent with the things, some of the things that he's saying. It makes you think like, well, what will be the straw that breaks the proverbial camel's back, if it was such a thing? And so when I made the parallel to Biggie, it was like Biggie had that interview where he was like, yo, I like, he laying back like, yo, I think somebody trying to kill me. And it was just like this energy when you sit and watch it. And it's just like, damn, yeah, I feel that, right? Like, and we know, like, spirituality, we know that energies are a real thing if you subscribe to that, right? And so just the energy that's surrounding him, it could be like not being able to see his kid. It could be so many things that could potentially trigger him, right? And so if somebody's an extremist in every aspect of their life, then an extreme act to end your life might not necessarily be out the question. There's nothing I'm hoping for, but it just doesn't feel well sitting and watching what's happening with
It's a lot, man, and again, certain things I try not to comment on and just and resort to certain people that have expertise in the field to just see what their thoughts and opinions are as they watch these things unfold, like Kyrie. and the anti-Semitism. Like I don't know a clue about it, so you just taught me a lot about it. Even like the documentary and not even just commenting, because I think some people just comment for the sake of comment as opposed to like take the time out to watch the documentary. And even to your point with like journalism, I'm like, I as being on the podcast, it's like I need to take that role more serious and do more research and see what others are saying about certain things to get a culminating effect around the subject. And so same thing with Kanye, like everybody wants to diagnose him, everybody wants to say this is the reason, that's the reason, where's his friends, all these different things, but no one truly knows and these different things, what's going on and the intricacies that is around. So I appreciate you offering your opinion and perspective on that because it helps me shape some of my thought process of like how I can begin to understand and analyze what's happening with these individuals. The last thing I'll show before it, man. So again, y'all see how complex this brother was with the conversation. Make sure y'all check out Rhetorically Speaking. Make sure y'all check out his podcast. Because not only again, this was in the short time that I have him. So imagine when he gets to fully just digest a subject and a topic and go into these different details and different components. So please check that out. Phil, is anything you want to leave the people with, man?
Them white people ain't from TEDx didn't pay me for that, man. So it's not, and that's a real thing. Again, like what changed between 4 years when I did that in 2018. I just wanted to speak specifically to Black folk, and if white folk got it, it was a beautiful thing. And yes, I got like speaking engagements from it, still getting speaking engagements from it. But you know, this idea of taking, Black intellectual property, man, and or just taking intellectual property, period, but especially that of Black folk and putting it on that platform that they got. They got 86,000 views. This goes into them getting money from YouTube and all of this. Is I can't say that I would do it again.
Mm,
Um, but I do realize that it reached folk. And so, it's this thing that we navigate, you know what I'm saying? Like, because yeah, I speak a lot about Black liberation, but for me, I love everybody. Like shared humanity is what, brings us together, right? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, TEDx Talk ain't pay me for that, but still, feel free, go watch it on my page. Don't watch it on a joint. But no, like, listen, man, like, I just I appreciate you for having me on. Um, and I'm just, I'm just, I'm always thankful. You know what I mean, for people who are, you know, who want more for themselves, right? Who want more for their families, who want more for others. And I can honestly say that's you, And so like I get podcast requests from people and I'm like, I go look at their joint, I see what they're doing. Like, do you just want to have me on because I'm a Black man who talks about mental health? I realize that's a thing, you know what I mean? And so that's when it's just like, all right, what you want? You need to go buy 5 t-shirts. Go
mm.
buy 5 t-shirts and I'll come on. You know what I'm saying? But for somebody like you and other folk who are real, and not just Black folk, just other folk who are out here really having conversations and really doing the work, I'm always appreciative. So yeah, it was my pleasure. It's definitely been a long time coming. We've been trying forever to connect, and so just things happen as they're supposed to happen, right? And I think that's what gives me peace and brings me joy. Just recognizing that my mom always say trust the process. She was saying it before Joel Embiid, right? She was saying trust the process, right? And I've really started trusting the process with life, man. And I encourage everybody to do the same. It's okay, not to be happy all the time. It's for me to people ask like, Phil, are you happy? And I'm like, I don't desire to be happy, right? I desire to be able to experience every emotion and be able to navigate them accordingly. So that doesn't mean I don't want to be happy. I want to be happy. I want to experience joy, but I'm also going to experience anger. I want to know how to navigate that and sadness. I want to experience that so I can know how to navigate that, right? So if I can experience all the emotions, then for me, I'm good with that. And so I hope you all just make space for you to experience all your emotions.
That's a clip right there, man. I'm making sure to clip that up and put that out on socials, man. Again, I thank you, man. I gotta give you and your rose. You between you and Rashawn. from that 2018, y'all have spawned literally my career because I've seen like similar what y'all doing and kind of finding my space within it and where I can fit and trying to navigate. So I appreciate you giving you your flowers because you deserve them and all of the things that you do to help the community with these deep these intellectual conversations. So I appreciate you on that realm, man.
And so no, I'm glad you brought up Rashawn because like hashtag you good man is a product of Rashawn. You know, like
Mm,
I never met the brother a day of my life. I
me
keep saying
neither.
I'm gonna get to Charlotte to go to his the black tie event that the Eustress Inc. Black tie event that he has every spring. But real quick story. So, I was following him on social media for a little bit. This was back then. And he had the locker room talk. And what I did was I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go on there. I want to see what's happening. And so I called in one time, then I hung up because I was like, I ain't gonna be a part. I ain't. And so then I called back and I'm sitting there listening, and then I started having a conversation. It was only like four of us, and three of them was his homies. And so we sitting there talking. I hung up and I called once it was over. I called my homegirl, was like, yo, I was just in this space. It was just brothers having conversation with one another, just checking on one another, talking about what's going on with them. It was them, his three homies, and myself. And it was just like, yo, like I it's needed. And so that's when I started the hashtag you good man group, like probably a couple months right after that. Had it at Uncle Bobby's. Now I have it at Bailey Street Books on Wednesdays, and you can quantifyllc.net/YGM, or you could just follow me on Instagram at Phil_Roundtree. If you're local, I post when I have it. But that, and then that went from that to the podcast and having like I don't know how many episodes. It's been a while since I had an episode on,
Mm.
but I just wanted to shout him out because again, this is what it's about. It's about just if we talk about black male mental health, it's about brotherhood. It's about vulnerability, transparency, and accountability when it comes to this work that we do. So no
And
doubt.
and me going to you good man help facilitate with King's Corner under the Black Man Hill umbrella. So look how
Word,
like all
word,
it like
word. Exactly,
it go hand in hand
exactly.
with one another.
But but this goes back to our initial conversation, right? When we was talking about takeoff and the things that can come from that, right? It
Mhm.
can it can it's so much pain and trauma that can come from that. Similarly, Rashawn having, I guess being on the Breakfast Club, and then I may have known him before the Breakfast Club though. But then going on locker room talk spawns hashtag you good man, which spawns, you know, other so many other things that take place. So we can have healthy,
Oh,
impact as well.
oh, oh! I feel like there's a title of this podcast in there somewhere. Healthy something, healthy in somewhere. I gotta figure it out, but I feel like we look at it in the bad context, but there's a healthier context, a healing
For
context in there
sure.
that can happen as well.
No doubt.
Um, ah, healthy impact of trauma. How does that sound? I gotta get your
You
approval.
the
No, but you
you the
was in
brains
it.
behind the operate.
You were in it, and I don't want to put your name attached to it, and that wasn't what you agreed on because I did that before, and I'm like, you know what? Let
I
me
don't
reach
know
out to the
because
person.
I mean, healthy things can come from trauma. Dang, so I usually just do. What do I do?
I'm gonna name it you good man. I'm gonna name it you good man. That's gonna be the title of
See, again,
the
and this is where we go. Again, the sophisticated. Let's get it. Make it simple, right? Like hashtag you good man.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Word, word.
I appreciate you, brother.
No doubt.
Last but not least, please go share this episode with somebody. Share a quote that Phil. He had a lot of quotables in there. Share a quote in there. Let people know what you can expect from the episode. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Let it. Hey man, when he said this, leave that as the review. So when people looking up the podcast and they trying to see which episodes they listen to that part. And last but not least, always remember that this platform has never been about being a replacement to therapy. It's an alternative place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.